This is the Show Up Show, helping coaches, service providers, leaders, and entrepreneurs to master showing up to build their brand, authority, and grow their business. Whether it's showing up on social media, in front of an audience, on a live interview, or an actual stage, this podcast is going to help you overcome visibility fear to confidently brand yourself as the authority in your industry. I'm Joanne Chan, aka the Confidence and Visibility Queen, and I am on a mission to share how I went from a nobody to the confident leader I am today, what I have learned, and what I have done to build my brand and business from scratch, and help you do the same so that you can make an impact in the world with the meaningful work that you do. Whether you are new to the business world or feeling unsure about public visibility, or you want to be seen and heard in a way that doesn't feel icky but authentic to you, you will discover how to become visible in your own unique way and show up as the confident entrepreneur you have always dreamed about becoming. Now, it's time to get you show up and be confidently visible so you can easily attract more clients and opportunities for yourself. Our guest today is the founder of Master Talk. He coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become top 1% communicators in their industry. He also has a very popular YouTube channel called Master Talk, with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world, because he believes that the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who cannot afford a communication coach. So ladies and gentlemen, help me welcoming the rockstar communicator, Brenden Kumarasamy. Brenden, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Joanne. Thanks for having me.
Okay, the first question, let's dive right in, and of course, let's start with your story. Do I have a story? Because I always believe that we all do what we do today. There is a why behind it. There is a story behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share that. So I grew up in Montreal in Canada. And for those who are listening who might not know this, Joanne, Montreal is a city where you need to know how to speak French, which is a language I did not know. And my parents looked at me when I was 5 years old and they said, "Hey, Brenden, you need to go to French school because that's how you're going to learn the language." So every time I would go up in front of a crowd, and back then it was first graders when I was 6 years old, I had to give presentations in a language I didn't know. So I would look at an audience and go, bonjour. And that was my life as a speaker, Joanne. The second piece is I have a physical disability in my left arm, so it's crooked because of an accident I had at birth. So I always had a lot of anxiety around speaking. And then the third thing is I actually studied in accounting, which has literally nothing to do with what I'm doing now professionally. So I was never meant to be a communication professional. That was never my dream. That was never my goal. But through a series of experiences in my life, it led me to where I am today, because I feel that, hey, wait a second, if I could go from the person that I was to being a great speaker, I think anybody listening to this podcast can too.
Yeah, I think it's so important to share that part of your story, because we always see people on stage and people who are great at public speaking. We thought they are talented or they are just, extrovert, right? And they are born with this gift. But no, it's actually a skill that you can learn. And this is what we want to talk about today in this episode, is how do you learn these skills and what are the skills that you need to learn. So why do so many people struggle with public speaking?
Yeah, beautiful question. You know, the reason I believe people struggle with speaking is because of the education system. So it doesn't really matter where you grew up, whether it's in Canada, in the US, in China, Malaysia, UK, it doesn't really matter. We all go through a similar kind of education system where we first learn how to give presentations. But here's the thing, Joanne, all of those presentations we learn in elementary school or high school have three fundamental problems. The first one is that they're all mandatory. You don't wake up one morning and say, "Hey, Joanne, you want to get breakfast and present all day?" Nobody says that. Nobody does that. So that's challenge one. Challenge two is you don't present something you're really passionate about. So it's never, "Hey, Brenden, hey, Joanne, what are you excited to talk about today? Do you want to talk about coaching or media or your favorite book?" No, you have to talk about Shakespearean poetry or the history of Singapore or the Renaissance. And that might be interesting to some people, but I think for most kids out there, it probably isn't. So you're not presenting something you like. And the third challenge, which is the worst one of all, Joanne, is that every single presentation is tied to a punishment. So if you don't do a great job, not only do you lose marks, you also get embarrassed in front of the class. And when we do that 100% of the time, we grow up believing that communication is a chore. So it becomes one.
Well, thanks for sharing because it reminded me of one of my experiences in presentation. And it was during my college day, I was presenting like alone, right? So it was a solo presentation. It wasn't even a group presentation. So I was up there presenting something I wasn't passionate about, like you said, like the history, because I study art. So I had to present something. I love art and passionate about art, but it was about history of like Renaissance and things like that. And I have to memorize a lot of terms. I suck at it. And as a result, I failed the module, And but my lecturer at the time, she was so kind, and I would say she was willing to give me a second chance to present again. And I'm forever grateful for her, and because she gave me a second chance. And the second attempt, of course, I did a lot better. I didn't just try to memorize the whole script. I just tried to speak in a language that I also understand, So I hope that makes sense. And I think it's really important to really like ask ourselves, okay, what am I really passionate about? And if you could give a talk for 30 minutes without any preparation, what would that be, right? That's like a question that I see on social media nowadays. So, okay, how would you help someone? Because I know a lot of my listeners, they are having anxiety around public speaking or even just doing a podcast like this, right? How would you help them overcome the fear?
For sure. So there's two parts to that. One is mindset and one is tactical, practical advice. So let's start with the mindset. I'll throw it back to you, then we can jump into the practical side. So the mindset's really simple. Let's broaden the question because I think a lot of us overcomplicate speaking and fear around just that topic. How do we overcome fear in general? So let's think about this, and everyone listening to this can do this exercise with us, which is take out a piece of paper and just write down what is the accomplishment in your life that you're the most proud of. That could be getting married and having children. That could be going to college, getting your first job, starting a business, immigrating to a new country. Whatever that goal is, write it down, look at it, not goal, something you've accomplished rather, and then ask yourself, did I feel fear while accomplishing this goal? And 100% of the time, Joanne, the answer is yes. Yeah, I had fear when I immigrated to a new country. I had fear when I had my new job. I had fear when I asked that person on a date. So the question now becomes, why did we do it anyways, despite the fear? And the answer to that is that the motivation to achieve that goal was greater than the fear was associated with. Example, being broke is a lot scarier than applying for a job, so you apply for the job. Being alone is a lot scarier than asking people on dates if you're old enough, so that way it gets scarier and you end up doing it. So going back to the point around speaking, the question now becomes, we can all overcome the fear of speaking, but the problem is we don't have a motivation great enough to incentivize us to actually push through in the same way that with the other things that we've accomplished, we had that incentive and we just need to find that for speaking. And that's why I ask people, how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? If you really think about that question and find a compelling answer, like for you in your case, it makes a lot of sense because you're a coach, but also because you're a podcast host. So of course you need to be an exceptional speaker. So that's the way I think about it.
Right. So, okay. So for people who are not a podcaster, not a coach, maybe they're just a regular guy, but they have to present at work or they have to do sales calls. This, communication is the daily thing that we do, right? So what is really the first step towards becoming a better communicator?
Absolutely. So the second part, which is more the tactical and the practical,
Yeah.
really goes around my analogy to speaking. So for me, communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, Joanne. So one of those balls is vocal tone variety, how you vary your voice. One of them is smiling. One of them is eye contact. One of them is storytelling, body language. And it can get really confusing really fast if you try and do everything at once. But the trick now becomes, what are the 3 easiest balls to juggle in speaking? Or rather, to your question, what is the easiest one? What is number one? If you just focus on that, then you'll build momentum quickly. And I'll give it to you. It is the random word exercise, in my opinion, where you take a word, it could be anything like phone, or I have a new diet. So macadamia nuts could be another one. It could be tissue box, whatever you want. And you create a 60-second presentation out of thin air with no preparation. This serves two key purposes, Joya. Number one, and people can write this down if they want, if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. If you can talk about light bulbs for 60 seconds, when you go back to your expertise, let's say in coaching, or the regular guy, let's say that guy in marketing or something, it's really easy for that person to speak on their expertise because they talked about something they had no experience in. And the second purpose, and I'll throw it back to you, is small talk. What is small talk at the end of the day? It's two strangers having a conversation before meeting each other and not knowing what the questions will be. So you don't have any prep time. So if you know how to do the random word exercise, you practice this a lot with your kids, if you have any kids listening to this, with your nieces, your nephews, your family members, and you do this a lot, you'll get really good at speaking off the cuff.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think two are very practical tips, and thanks for sharing them. But for my entrepreneurs, for my introverted friends listening here, they will be like, Brenden, but I'm shy, I'm this, I'm that, right? Because again, introverted, they just don't want to talk to people, I'm not introverted, right? Obviously, but I don't know exactly how they feel about communication. But what kind of other, maybe, do we have any other tips or advice for introverted friends over here?
Yeah, for sure, Joanne. I can't relate to it either, but the only reason I know the answer is because I'd say 75% of my client base today, as you can imagine, are
Yeah.
not extroverts. They're introverts. So based on the experience I've had with them, here's what I'll say. There's two ways of approaching this conversation on introverts. The first one is doing the exercises, the same exercises, but doing it in a way that's more comfortable for the introvert. Example, random word exercise. You don't have to do that in front of a group of 10, 15 people. You could do this alone in your basement with nobody watching. You could do this outside when you're walking the dog and nobody's around. Like there's ways of doing the exercise in a way that's comfortable for you. Because for me, the key idea here, Joanne, is not pushing through your fears and breaking obstacles. I'm not a big fan of that. For me, it's more what James Clear teaches, which is the author of Atomic Habits, which is like the 2-minute habit. Do something easy, right? And build up the momentum over time. So for me, it's doing what's comfortable for you. Because if you're having fun with something, you'll do it for a longer period of time. That's really always my belief. That's the one piece. The second piece is acknowledging a lot of the strengths that I actually had to learn from introverts over time. I'll list them off really fast. The first one is listening. Introverts talk less, Joanne, so naturally, they're a lot better at listening to the audience and adapting the message. And I had to learn that for years. I'm still a terrible listener. You can tell I ramble a lot. So there you go. I still have a lot to work on. So that's one. Number two is the pause. Because introverts don't say a lot, it's a lot easier for me to teach them how to stay silent sometimes, to really emphasize key points of their message. And the third one that's often not well known is that they're a lot more accessible. Let's say Gary Vaynerchuk, right? The thing with Gary Vaynerchuk is that you either really like him or you really don't, right? There's no middle ground. By the way, I'm a personal fan of the guy. I love his work. He's a big inspiration for me and a reason why I started creating content. But there's a huge population who look at Gary Vee and go, oh my God, he is like the devil. I hate this human being. Whereas nobody says that about Brene Brown. You don't see somebody going, I hate that Brene Brown person. Because if you say that, everybody's going to come and arrest you and your family. Obviously, I'm kidding there, but you get
That's
the
so
idea.
true. Yes. Why is that? Because she's more accessible, like you said?
That's correct. And to build on that, I'm glad you asked me that. Nobody asked me the follow-up question. Why is that? It's because Brene speaks in a more introverted tone. She has some moments of extroversion. Extroversion, for those who listen, just means like where she's like more upbeat, like in her TED Talks. But most of her tone is really relatable. Whereas Gary Vee's an extreme extrovert. He's really boom, boom, boom. He's swearing at you at every half minute. He's throwing like stones at everybody. He's yelling all the time. He never uses his low vocal tones. Whereas somebody like Brene, I've yet to meet somebody in my life who goes, I really hate Brene Brown. Like I've never heard of that. And it's just because she's really balanced in the way that she speaks, and introverts just do a much better job of being accessible than extroverts do.
So would you say, and why is it so important to stay silent and pause while we are giving a speech or a presentation?
Absolutely. So the reason why the pause is so key, Joyanne, it actually serves two purposes. So the first one you brought up very well, which is when you're giving a presentation, if you don't pause, people don't know which parts of your presentation to pay attention to. So let's say I do a sentence and I go, the most important thing to remember is that you need to brush your teeth every day. So because I'm using the same pace and there's no pause, I almost will forget the tip. Versus if you go, the most important thing to remember is to brush your teeth every day. So when you pause, everyone wakes up and they go, oh, whatever Brenden is about to say next is really important. But at the beginning, I would say just have fun practicing the exercise. And the best way to do that is actually strategy two, which is the second purpose of pausing, which is to remove uhs, ums, and ahs from the way you speak. So what great speakers do is whenever they're about to go they just replace that with nothing. And that's a great way to practice pausing to start and then get a little strategic about it later.
You know, as a speaker, as a podcaster, I know it takes a lot of conscious awareness and effort to really pay attention to to yourself while you're speaking, right, in front of a group of people. So yeah, and I always watch my own presentation in the very beginning just so I can improve. So, and this is something that I would tell my listeners to do as well, right? If you are just trying to build out your confidence or improve your speaking, you have to watch your own presentation. I know, like, you wouldn't want to watch it like, on video or podcast. The last thing that you want to do is to watch the video, but you really have to do it. So, you also mentioned that you hear a lot of generic advice out there, like be yourself, or imagine everyone in the underpants. And you said it doesn't make sense. So what would you tell people to do instead?
Yeah, absolutely, Joanne. I'm glad you caught on that. So a couple of points, going back to the random word exercise, the reason why for you specifically, since we're going to the back to the regular guy or gal, right?
Yeah.
The reason it makes perfect sense for you to review the tape is because you're already a professional speaker. So
Mhm.
you're speaking to different audiences and you have those tapes recorded. So let's say I was coaching you just as a hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
I could look at a speech and we could look at it together and say, let's pause here for the next speech, because you're always delivering the same talk over and over again.
Mhm.
But for the regular person, what this looks like, do the same thing, but you're not giving speeches anywhere in the public. Just do that when you're practicing the random word exercise. Take that random word exercise and just say, for this word, I have to really try and pause sometimes in my speech. And that's how you see the improvement. That's one exercise. I can give you one more, and if you want, I can give you a third one too. And the second one I would say is called the question drill. So the question drill just means, Joanne, that we get asked questions all the time in our life. At school, at work, at home, from our significant other, all the way to the guy that we're trying to sell in some sort of service that we're running for on sales team. And the problem is most of us are not ready for the questions life has in store for us. I'll give you an example with me. Like a few years ago when I started guesting on podcasts, I think this was 4 years ago at this point. I was horrible. Like I was a kid fresh out of college. I didn't know why people wanted to have me on their show. And I remember some guy, he asked me the funniest question, which is the first question you actually asked me. Where does the fear of communication come from? Like, where does this thing come from? Which is a really good question, but I didn't know the answer to it because it was my first podcast. I said, I don't really know, man. Los Angeles? Maybe Kuala Lumpur, maybe London. I don't really know. So I kind of messed that up. But how did I fix this? Every single day, Joanne. And that's how I become an expert quickly in my industry. Is every day, very simple. I just answered one question that I thought the world would ask me about my expertise. So first day was, how do you overcome your fear of speaking? Day two was, what tips do you have for introverts? Day three is, what's your vision for Master Talk? But here's the punchline. If you do that every single day for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your expertise and you'll be bulletproof. So that's what I encourage people to do.
Well, that's brilliant. Wow, that's so brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I think I heard that before, just that I don't do it. It's a thing. We always know what to do, but we don't do what we know, right? We know what to improve. Like we can just go hire a coach or watch a bunch of videos online or attend a class, but we don't do it. And again, I think it goes back to the mindset part, which is the first step, right? You have to really fix, I would say, or improve, right? Is your mindset. How about, as we know COVID is kind of like behind us now, but virtual presentation is still very common nowadays. It is becoming more and more common nowadays because it's very different when you are delivering a presentation online virtually versus on stage in person, right? So what strategies do you recommend for us to deliver an engaging presentation virtually when you don't really see the audience?
Yeah, absolutely, Joanne. So there's three key differences between in person and
Mhm.
online. Let's go through them. So the
Okay.
first one is eye contact. So eye contact just means when you're in person, you move your head around the audience to look at everyone who's there. But on online presentations, whether you're speaking to one person like we're doing with each other right now, or 10,000 people, you're only supposed to look in one direction, which is the camera lens of the laptop or computer you're using. And that gives the illusion that you're looking at everyone directly on the screen. So that would be advice one, keep your eyes on the lens. And if you're in person, move your body around to get everyone feel included. And bonus points, if the room's small enough, there's like 10 people, try and look into everyone's eyes at least once before your presentation ends. It's a little tough though for beginners, but you work your confidence up. That's number one difference. The second main difference between online and in person is energy. And you actually hinted at that at the question, which is, hey, when you're in person, it's really easy to show up with energy. And you also have to take it seriously. You have to shower, you have to get up early, you have to hug people, you have to give them high fives. So you can feed off the energy. Even if you're an introvert, you can still feed off a little bit off the energy because they give you a lot of positive reaffirmation, right? They go, oh my God, I can't wait for you to present. I'm looking, especially if you're a coach entrepreneur, like people want to hear you talk. That's why you're giving the speech. That's the second piece. So what does that mean as advice? That means when you're online, I'm just talking in my basement, like there's nobody here besides you living in some part of the world. So the only way to get better at this, in my experience, is get better in person and bring as much of that energy on this call. So obviously I have a lot, and you do too, by the way, right? We both have good energy on this call, but that means that when we're in person, we're probably super flamboyant. And
I can
that's
tell that.
really the secret. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's number two. And the third one really quick is accessibility. That just means when I'm having a speech, let's say in person, and the person in front of me has feedback for me, I could just get dinner with them right after and say, hey, what did you think of the speech? Because I have access to my audience. They're right in front of me. Online, the Zoom call just ends. So you have to take an extra step to get on calls with people to get their feedback. And those are the three differences.
Right. So during the presentation virtually, how do you what are some of the little things that you can do to keep them engaged? For me, I use question a lot. I interact with them in the chat, right? Ask them to put their answers in the chat, right? What else can we do to keep them engaged and not fall asleep or use their phone and scroll on their social media while we are talking?
So here's been my experience. I probably have 50 tips just
Mm,
on this point. But
okay.
here's the most important one. The most important one for everyone listening is, are you booking 15 minutes every single week in your calendar to practice what we already talked about? Because if we're not going to do the random word exercise or the question drill, everything I'm going to share, this is what I do. I always call out an audience whenever I speak to make sure people get results, is if you're booking that time in, that's how you build the foundation. So provided you did that, so if you haven't, do that
Mhm.
right now, then the other piece becomes, what are some of the tactics we can implement to get better at online? You mentioned a couple, so I'll just add on the new stuff. One of the ways I do it is I call the strategy. I use this a lot in my free trainings online, called the forced participation. So the forced participation looks like this, because one challenge a lot of people have with online is you want engagement, but you also can't say, hey, what do you guys think? Everyone starts unmiking, they start interrupting each other. It becomes a problem, right? It loses the flow. So here's what I do. I ask a question in the chat, people answer. And then what I do is, let's say a guy named Michael is in our workshop and he said, hey, I think the vision for my communication is better relationship with my family. So what I'll do is I'll read the share. I'll say, hey, Michael, I really love your share on building a relationship with your family. Do you mind just unmiking really quick and just sharing your thoughts for 30 seconds? I'd love to hear from you. So it's forced participation in a way where the person doesn't feel uncomfortable. And then if the person doesn't answer, all you have to do is just go, let's say you don't hear anything, you just go, oh, I always like to give 3 seconds. So 3, 2, 1, no worries. Hey, Jason, I loved your share on being a great role model for your kids. Hey, can you share more about that? Usually within 2 or 3 tries, somebody jumps in and will share. So that's the trick.
Well, that is a new trick. Yeah, I've not heard of that before. So thanks for sharing. I'm gonna
Of
try
course.
using it in my next presentation. So, you are definitely obviously a rock star communicator and top 1% communicator out there, right? So what do you believe are the key attributes to being a world-class communicator?
For sure, Joanne. Fantastic question. For me, what it comes down to, because I'm definitely not number one. I think anyone who thinks they're number one is probably not number one. But I try to be the best in the category for sure. It's a framework that I think separates the best from everyone else, and it's called GVO. So GVO stands for goals, vision, output. So let's go through that framework together. So goals just means a lot of us, Joanne, have goals for our health, our relationships, our money, etc. But how many of us have goals for our communication skills? And the answer for most of us is probably no, because a lot of the times they've heard this. That's why I coined the term communication goal setting, and I created a framework around this, where you basically just pick speakers you admire. It could be a boss at work, a thought leader, somebody that you want to become, and you study their speeches while you're eating lunch every week. It just gives you so much more insight on how to be that person. So that's what I did early in my career, and I still do this today with Alex Hormozy, who's I spent a lot of my time on, because he's a new thought leader who's just entered the scene, and he's a lot more closer to my age than Gary Vee is, right? So I'm just studying those people. But for you listening, it's going to be somebody different, because you probably don't want to be a thought leader. Actually, you do, because your audience is coaches, entrepreneurs, etc. So for you, it'll be a mixed bag. That's G. V just means vision. So when we think about Olympic athletes, Joanne, they're really good at closing their eyes and visualizing themselves at the Olympics. Okay, running that race, getting the gold medal, and swimming that lane and getting the key, going a ski hill, and getting the gold medal. And that visualization plays a key part of their success. But it's non-existent in the field of communication. There's no one who tries and closes their eyes and visualizes their dream, speaking on a TED Talk, being a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast, doing that visualization. And I've been doing that for years, and that's how I've gotten a lot of on some of the bigger shows, because of that visualization, that work. And finally, O just means output. So output just means having a structured schedule to work on it. If I looked at your calendar right now, somebody's listening to this podcast, would I see communication practice on anywhere on that calendar? Answer's probably no. So try and add that in. Do a couple of practice runs.
Yeah, and how do you personally prep yourself? I mean, before giving a speech or going on a show, do you still prep yourself? And do you still feel fear, any fear or anxiety? Because sometimes I still do, after doing so many, I still do have a little bit of fear or anxiety, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just not big anymore. So the way that I think about this, Joanne, is the fear will always be there,
Yeah.
but it's always contextual to the situation you're in. So example, my first 50 podcasts, oh my God, it was really scary. I don't know why people interview. I had a ton of imposter syndrome. When you get to the number I'm at too, which isn't 50 anymore, you get a lot more comfortable. But even after so many, I had one really, really big show where it's oh man, I've been listening to this guy's show for a long time. Now I'm really afraid to be the person on the show. So there's still always situations that will create fear. That's why for me, when I solve this with clients, it's always about saying, what is the context that we're scared of, and how do we fix that context? For example, if Elon Musk called me tomorrow and said, hey, Brent, I'll pay you $3 million. Can you coach me? I'll fly you out tomorrow. Would I be scared? Yeah. You can't prepare for that, and that's okay. But as long as you can prepare for everything else, I think you'll be better off.
Yeah, I think preparation is really the most important, key to success, right? In communications. Like you said, it's not just tomorrow I have a show, today I start preparing. No, you have to start preparing every day now, right? You said, do the exercise, the random word exercise, ask yourself question and answer it. Opportunities are always there, right? But when opportunities arise, you want to say yes, right? It's not I'm not ready yet, right? No, you want to grab the opportunity because who knows, it might be a golden ticket to your next level, right? maybe Elon Musk call you, right? Or maybe someone,
Yeah.
who knows? You never know. So yeah, there's so much to talk about. But is there anything that we really want to talk about? Perhaps I didn't ask you or didn't let you.
Yeah, for sure, Joanne. Happy to add on that. So I'll just give you the final easy three. So I call this my easy three. So the first one to recap is the random word exercise. Pick any word you want. It could be a toothpaste, mango, anything, and just create a 60-second presentation out of thin air. Do that 5 times a day for 3 weeks, and you'll be ahead of 99% of people, in my opinion, in that exercise. Because nobody gets to 100 unless you're really committed. Number 2 is the question drill. Same thing. 1 question every day. If you're more comfortable, I'll give you bonus points. If you take out your phone, there's free voice recorder apps. Write out the answer to the question and speak it out. If you do that with 100 questions, especially if you're in sales, like you're a coach, you're an entrepreneur, you're going to be deadly on sales calls. Like I used to be so scared of prospect calls. And now it's so easy because you're always asking the same questions. You always get asked the same question because it's always the same offer that you're selling. So just get better at the question drill. And number 3, this is my signature move. This is how I built my coaching business. I'll give it away. It's just, I hope people implement it. It's free money. Okay. I call it the birthday video message. Here's what I do. Very simple. So my top 100 clients, if you have 7 clients, it's with 7 clients. That's okay. All you have to do on your Google Calendar, whatever you're using, put your clients' birthday on that day. Let's say it's December 1st or something. And then what you do on their birthday, when your Google tells you it's their birthday, take out your phone, put a crazy birthday hat on. I bought mine for $15 on Amazon. Open your phone and just go, hey, Joyanne, guess whose birthday it is today? It's yours. I hope you have a wonderful, I'm so grateful to blah, blah, blah. Work together, blah, blah, blah. You tell stories. Man, that gets you client loyalty for life. And that's why 70% of my business today is word of mouth. And it'll probably be 100% in like the next 2 years. So that would be my third tip.
Thank you so much. I know it has been, I'm sure my listeners are taking a lot golden nuggets away from this episode. Now, tell my listeners where they can learn more about you or work with you or connect with you. Where should I send people to you?
So there's 2 ways to do that. The first one is the YouTube channel. Just type Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second piece of advice is for those of you who want to see my tips live on a Zoom call, everything we've talked about and me applying them. I actually do a free training every 2 weeks on this topic. It's a Zoom call. Bunch of people attended. Kids attend this call. Big executives attend this call. Everyone's invited. And the website for that is rockstarcommunicator.com.
I love that. I love that Rockstar Communicator because I just rebranded my my coaching program from Rocky to Rockstar. So I feel like we are totally aligned in our mission to help people become
Awesome.
rock stars in what they do. So I look forward to more collaborations with you in the future and maybe send some of my clients to your workshop, attend for your Zoom meetings for free. All right, guys, I know you learned a lot from today's episode because I personally learning a lot from Brenden today. I wrote down a lot of tips and notes, everything that he said, right? So go back to the beginning and listen to this episode again and again and again, and remember to take actions, right? Do some of the exercise that he shared. And if you want to meet me and my guests, my community, we host a virtual dinner party every, I would say, once or twice a month. So the link is in the show note below. Make sure you go and check it out as well. I put all Brenden's link in the show note below as well. All right, I hope to see you there, and until next time, keep showing up. Success doesn't show up for you until you show up and pursue your own success. Hi there, thanks for listening today, and I would love to meet you at our virtual dinner party. Once or twice a month, we come together as a community in a safe and empowering environment to help and support one another in our entrepreneurship journey. So what is a virtual dinner party? A VDP is not a networking event, it's not a teach event, and it's not a webinar where you don't get to talk. I want you to imagine the VDP being a cross between a mastermind, speed dating, and a Tony Robbins event. And most importantly, there is nothing for sale. My goal for you in attending our VDP is to help you build real confidence, gain more visibility for yourself, and build a deeper connection within our community. What is the catch? There isn't one. If you are a coach, consultant, entrepreneur, or podcaster, come and join us for a truly unique and world-class experience. And there is a choice of dates and times for you to attend. To RSVP, just send me a DM on Facebook with the word VDP now.